Hello everybody, this is going to be my screencast assignment for Marital Status for Mathematics Instructions, Section 317. Today is April 11th. So to go ahead and start off here, we're going to do, I decided to choose choice 3 of the 3 options that we had for our assignment. Choice 3 was to study the associations of the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey provided for us of samples in 2003. I chose to answer the 2 questions of find any association between women who are pregnant and their age, education, and marital status, as well as any correlation between iron and gender, race, and age. So to start off, we're going to look at women who are pregnant, and the 3 variables that we have to look at are, again, age, education, and marital status. So to start off, we're going to look at pregnant women and their age, any correlation between them here. So the women that are pregnant, if we take a look up here in this first box, you can see age, pregnant, and yes. So out of all of the women here in our sample, which there are 135 women in this sample, only 12 of them are pregnant, which is about 8.9% of women that went ahead and took part in this investigation. Only 8.9% were pregnant. And we can go ahead and look at the ages of these pregnant women by selecting these individual dots. You can see that the youngest age of a woman that was pregnant was 19, and the oldest age was 43. That leaves us with about a mean of 28.3 years. That means out of the 12 women that were pregnant, the average age for those women were about 29 years old, 28, 29. Most of the women here, though, as you can see, are between the ages of 20 and 30, 20 and 40. And out of the 135 women here, once again, 8.9 were pregnant, and about 6.6% of the women, 6.7% of the women, their test came back inconclusive. And as we can see here, some of these women varied quite differently in age, from age 13 to 58. As we can see, although most of the women who took part in this sample were not pregnant, so we don't really have a lot of evidence to go off here to find a correlation between women who were pregnant versus any other variable, because most of the women in our sample happen to not be pregnant. But we can find correlation within the little evidence that we do have. So once again here, the average age for the woman that was pregnant was about 28, 29 years old. Next, we'll look at pregnant versus education. So right here, as you can see, we have women that have an education of more than high school including a GED, or less than high school, meaning they didn't graduate from high school. And once again, out of the women here who had education status, only 7 of the women were pregnant, 6 of them were inconclusive. But again, most of the women were not pregnant in our sample here. About 83.6% of the women were not pregnant out of this sample. We had about 200 women who had pregnancy tests and an education status. So looking at what we have here out of the women who were pregnant, once again, there was only 7 women pregnant. 2 women had an education of more than high school. 2 had up to a GED, and 3 had less than high school. So only about 3.8% of the women that were pregnant had less than a high school degree and pregnant. 2.5% of the women had a GED and were pregnant, and 2.5% of the women had more than a high school degree and were pregnant. But again, most of the women were not pregnant. Then we have marital status. So that was the sample that we have here. We were able to get a good sample of about 71 women. You can see these are the women that were divorced, married, living with a partner, and never married. And these are the women that were pregnant. Out of all of the women that we sampled, 8 women were pregnant. I'm sorry, 7. 7 women were pregnant out of the 71 women that we had in the sample. So once again, not very much of a big sample ratio that we have here of women that were pregnant to go off of. Only about 9% of the women that we have were pregnant out of this 71 sample. But out of the sample that we do have, we can take a look at the marital status. 3 women out of the 7 that were pregnant were married. 4.2% of the women that were pregnant were married. 1.4% were living with a partner that was married, and 4.2% were never married that are pregnant. As you can see here, there's not too much of a relationship between women being pregnant and their marital status. But once again, we don't really have much information to go off of since most of the women in our sample were pregnant. So out of the 3 variables that we have, marital status, education, and age, I was not able to find much of a relationship between women who are pregnant and any of these variables. Marital status, education, and age. Didn't see much of a relationship. Excuse me. Now to answer question number 2, we have iron in micrograms per deciliter versus gender, race, and age. Let us start off and look at the iron in our sample size versus the gender of the sample. So as you can see here, on this bottom horizontal axis, we have the iron reading, and on the vertical axis, we have whether the sample was a male or female. And if we take a look at this column here, we can see out of the entire sample, which of the samples had an iron reading of less than 50 micrograms per deciliter. Now the average normal iron count for people are anywhere between 60 and 170 micrograms per deciliter. So that means any reading less than 60 would mean that the person is anemic, meaning that they have low iron in their blood. So here we have out of 162 men, 13% were anemic, and out of 164 women, 23% were anemic. 38 women were anemic, and 21 men were anemic. Iron versus race. As we can see here, we have quite a bit of different ethnicity backgrounds within our sample here. So out of our sample here, these are the amount of people who were anemic. Once again, that is 59% of our sample were anemic. About 20% were African American, 19% were white, 15% were Mexican American, and then the others you can see here. So as you can see, most of our sample that was anemic was, I shouldn't say most, pardon me, correction. We did have a pretty even amount of sample sizes here between the relationship of race and anemia, 20%, 19%, and 15% were all pretty even. So I would say that there is no association between race and iron count. And if we go ahead and look at iron versus age, we can see here that this is the iron count and the age of our samples. And here we have our legend that shows the color of these dots. These younger samples here, lighter color green, these are our younger samples, and as the darker it goes up, the older they are. So as we can see here, the data is pretty spread out. Here we have young and so forth. So the younger samples that we have pretty evenly spread out within their iron count, the amount that were anemic would be these samples here. But most of the students, or I'm sorry, I guess they would be kids around this age. Most of the teenagers between the ages of 10 and 20 here had a pretty even iron count between their sample size. This group also was fairly even within their sample size, and same with the other groups. We can take a look here. This is age 43 through 65, 65 through 85. None of the samples here, these samples were anemic. But from, as we can see, most of the samples that we had, regardless of their age, they had a fairly good iron. So from the data that I was able to look at using my sample size, this is the sample here. We were able to look at the sample education, marital status, gender, pregnant, race, age, and then iron. Look, I didn't find any relationships really between iron and age, race, or gender. Gender, once again, I do believe that more men were anemic than women. 23% were anemic that were men, 13% were women. But most of all of my data and samples were not showing any relationships. Okay, and that is the end of my screen cap assignment. Thank you.